joining us this morning. The topic is the European Space Strategy for European Security and Defense. And we are very glad to welcome our invited speaker from the European Commission, Guillaume Delaproze. Guillaume Delaproze is head of unit in DG DEFIS for innovation startups. And it's also interesting to hear a little bit also more on what you are doing. And we have from our member regions a company based in Brittany, Unseen Labs. And we will give the floor to Mrs. Wolf from the Aerospace Cluster Luft- und Raumfahrtforum from Baden-Württemberg. Because we have so many newcomers that have not yet heard of Nereus, I like to share with you one slide and briefly explain you who we are and what we are doing. Nereus stands for Network of European Regions Using Space Technologies. We offer regions and their stakeholder a platform to cooperate interregionally on the use of space and mobilize projects and partner and network together. We have currently 23 regions across Europe and 33 associate partners from different domains, industry, universities, companies. And so in the regions, we have really the whole stakeholder community of the triple helix that is concerned by our activities. And we try to contribute to shape local space communities and good collaboration amongst the different stakeholders of the value chain. Innovation, entrepreneurial activities, the use of space for purposes in the territories, the use of space for public policy purposes, but the use of space also in terms of creation of growth, high-level employment, regional development is an important target of our activities. In the pandemic, we experimented quite successfully with digital formats and figured that is a very successful way to keep in touch with our members on a regular basis. And we organize two series of webinars. One series is targeted at the cluster business community in our network. This is the one today. And we have another one targeted at the research and university community on education and training. They will have a webinar later today at 11 o'clock on gender balance, to which you are also very cordially invited. Now I would like to give the floor to our invited speaker, Guillaume Delaproze, to present us the strategy to learn more about it. Guillaume, for us, especially interesting is all what is concerned by the use of space. And you put also in the strategy a specific focus on intensifying collaborative work between space, security and defense, and to stimulate startups, SME, new space to cooperate. That is particularly interesting for our community, and there would be also interesting if you could go more in depth. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see me and hear me clearly. So I'm very pleased to address you this morning about this quite important milestone for the European Union, which is the adoption of the EU space strategy for security and defense. As you indicated, this strategy was adopted recently by the Commission and the High Representative on the 10th of March, and is a bit of a breakthrough in the European history. We are used to break silos and to remove taboos, so that's a new one. That's a new taboo that we are removing in bringing together much more closely space and defense. So that's an important milestone. And I will get back to this, but it will have long-term impact on the way we run space. So today, what I like to do is to give you all the backgrounds and the key elements of the strategy, perhaps focusing more than on collaborative work. I mean, what you've just said, the area of interest for you, but then during the Q&As, I would be happy to take any questions that you have. Can we display the slides, please? Thank you, Margarita. So if we can take the next one. Just a few elements in terms of backgrounds. I mean, where we are coming from. Basically, I mean, we had a first discussion at the level of defense ministers more than 1 year ago. It was in January 2022, 2 months after the anti-satellite test of Russia that took place in November 2021. And you remember that this anti-satellite test led to multiple debris in space, and that has been perceived really as a wake-up call, including by the defense community. Personally, I witnessed this discussion at the level of defense ministers, and I was really surprised to see already the level of maturity in defense ministries about the urgency of taking actions to increase the resilience of the space systems and of the Union to defend its interest in space and from space. Actually, we had more than 20 ministers that took the floor during that meeting in Brest to really express the need to urgently take actions in the context of the asset test of Russia. And that was before the war in Ukraine. Then 1 month later, we had an important defense package adopted by the Commission where indeed there was a kind of mandate or commitment by the Commission to promote dual use by design in developing new resilient services for governmental needs. And then 1 month later, we had the strategic compass. So that was adopted in the context of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, where clearly we've got the mandate from EU leaders to develop this EU space strategy for security and defense. The point was that because we are touching very sensitive fields, policy fields, defense and space, we wanted to have a very inclusive and transparent preparation with member states, with industry and academia. So we basically, to prepare this joint communication, we run 6 workshops, 6 thematic workshops with member states. We had 3 classified briefings. We had consultation with industry and with academia to really gather inputs, tests, ideas, so that the communication is not just a joint communication between the EEAS and the High Representative, so between the Commission and the High Representative, but basically reflects the collective views of member states. We can next move to the next slide. Next one, please. So the key strategic objectives of this strategy, I'd say there are 4 key objectives and 1 way of working. So the first one is to recognize space as a strategic and operation domain. So space clearly is no longer immune to debris that we know for since a long time, but space is no longer immune as well to threats and hostile activities from certain states. Therefore, while second objective, what we need to continue promoting responsible behavior, this remains the key driver of the European Union. At the same time, we need as well to uphold our position and be in a position to defend our interest in and from space. So basically, the point is to say that naivety is behind us, and now clearly we are taking actions to enhance our strategic posture and autonomy in space, and to be able to defend our interest in and from space. The way to get there is about breaking silos between space, defense, and security, and we'll get back to that later. We have in this strategy, we have 5 big pillars, 5 chapters, if you want. And again, all of them were discussed in details with member states and with industry. First pillar is about the space threat landscape. So basically, we need to know what's happening in space.
Hold on, I'm coming.
We need to have a better understanding and to raise the level of understanding of collective understanding of activities in space. Let me just mute. There is somebody that is not muted with an echo. Then chapter number 2 is about the resilience. So basically here the point is how can we better protect and make our space systems and services more resilient to really make it much complex and more complex and harder for third states to penetrate or put under pressure our space systems and services. So resilience by design, I'll get back to that. Chapter number 3 is about responding, the response. So basically, we want to be in a position to respond in case we need to respond to any space threat that would affect the security interest of the Union or one of its member states. Chapter number 4 is about the use of space for security and defense. We know and Ukraine and the war in Ukraine was a clear showcase, demonstrating the power of space in a conflict. Space can be a key enabler to recover, to gain military superiority in a conflict, so that we have seen in Ukraine. Therefore, we want to maximize the use of space for security and defense. And the last chapter is about the international dimension and the need to partner with some key partners. So if we move to the next one. Now, I just want to bring you quickly through the different chapters more in details for you really to have the full picture and background. So when it comes to the space threat landscape, here, what's behind is that, again, we need to, we cannot just be blind. We need to know. So we need to educate our member states. We need to have a collective understanding of space threats. And therefore, we decided that on a yearly basis, we need a classified report on a threat in space that would gather input from intelligence community of member states, intelligence services, but also that would build on the understanding that the Commission has of the threats, having in mind the fact that we are monitoring closely our program, EU Space Flagships, and we can gather very pertinent information that can feed this annual classified threat briefing. Here, for this action, I mean, it's very much in the remit of the European External Action Service and again, the intelligence community, but we can provide and gather inputs that can be usefully used and compiled. So this is something new. And again, the idea is that we would have this an assessment to really educate and have a common level of understanding of this space threat landscape. If we move to the next one, please. So as indicated, the next chapter is about how can we enhance the resilience and protection of the space systems and services in the EU. I'm very much insisting on the fact that the scope of this communication is not just about EU-owned assets, Galileo, Copernicus, and tomorrow IRI², but we are very much touching all the space systems that are delivering critical services in the EU. And I mean here, so EU-owned assets, member state-owned assets, and commercial assets. So we want to have a very broad and comprehensive understanding to ensure that we are targeting and focusing on all components. What are we proposing here? I'd like to focus on a few points. First, an EU space law. You've heard about that. The idea of the EU space law is to avoid fragmentation of rules. I mean, we know that 11 member states and additional member states are having or developing national space laws. But when assessing those different laws, we observe that, I mean, they are different. Some do contain security-related measures, other not. There is no level playing field or common understanding in terms of how much we should put in security. So what it means that we have different laws leading to difficulty for industry, because industry would have to comply with different set of rules within the EU, which is an admin burden and which may impact the competitiveness of the industry. It is an issue as well when it comes to security, because if member states do not have common understanding and common set of rules when it comes to security, this is a risk. This is a security risk, clearly. And it weakens the position of the Union and its member states in global forums. And here the risk is that basically other states would define standards rather than the Union, whereby it's always better to be the one setting the standards rather than being the one taking the standards. So that's why we want to advance with this EU space law. That would basically focus on three big areas: safety, this is very much about space traffic management; security; and sustainability, so basically the zero net debris approach, life cycle management, etc. In a nutshell, I mean, this EU space law would be the single market moment of space. So that's, I mean, what we are after. Number two, one of the action that we want to set up, and I think this is very important as well for startups, this is an information sharing and analysis center. The term center is a bit misleading. Actually, it's more about putting in place a network, bringing together first and foremost large industry and new commerce, new space startups and scale-ups. What's behind is to share best practices in terms of putting in place resilience measures or protocols, or how to address cyber attacks. So really the idea is to really put in place a mechanism, a network, through which large industry could share experience with smaller industry. So the point is really to ensure that the new space commerce could really grasp quickly the challenge of space threats and build upon what has been put in place by large industry to be up to the challenge quickly. Of course, as a second and long-term objective, the idea would be as well to share security incidents in that network, but that's a second step. When it comes to resilience and protection of space systems, of course, I mean, we are tackling critical technologies. Here, the point that we want to highlight is technological sovereignty. We are taking different actions. One is investments, raising investments, putting more budgets, notably from Horizon Europe, to plug gaps on critical technologies. That's number one. So basically, so far we had 10 million euros per year allocated to critical technologies in Horizon Europe. As of 2023, we will double that and put 20 million euros to reduce our critical dependencies in certain technologies. On top of that, we are re-energizing an instrument that we have put in place with the European Space Agency and the European Defence Agency, the joint task force, to basically align better our activities between the three entities and ensure that indeed we are reducing effectively and rapidly our critical dependencies in certain key technologies. Another important element when it comes to the resilience and protection of the space system is the industrial aspect and the protection of the security of supply. Two things here I'd like to mention. One is foreign directive investment. We want to take advantage of the FDI review that will take place later this year to make our instruments more robust and really up to the challenge and future challenges so that we can best protect our value chains in Europe. Two other points I mentioned here, CHIPS Act and Critical Raw Material Acts. So here the point is, how can we ensure that our space ecosystem can get access to what they need in terms of chips and in terms of critical raw materials, having in mind the specificities of this sector. So we are working very closely with DG Connect and DG Grow to get there. Of course, I mean, I would not be complete without mentioning capabilities. We need certain capabilities to be resilient. I like to dwell here on autonomous access to space. The situation that we face puts us in a very embarrassing situation. We have no EU launchers after the delays of Ariane 6 and failures of Vega C. So here the point is to see what can be done to give a new boost to EU autonomous access to space and see how we can draw lessons from the past and change radically the way we run business when it comes to access to space. Can we move to the next slide, please? And then we're moving to the response. So when it comes to the response, so I'll go quickly, but basically we need two things. One is we need to know. So for that, we need very specific services, what we call space domain awareness. This is very much intelligence related. We know that very few member states have the appropriate sensors to get that kind of information. So we need to define with those member states the modalities to get access to that kind of information and how to use this information at EU level. But clearly, we need first to know, to identify, characterize, and attribute any space threats. And the action number 2 is, once we know that we need to take actions and we need to respond in a very appropriate and timely manner to any space threats that would affect, again, the security of the EU and its member states. And here we have a range of instruments that we can quickly mobilize, starting from political statements, moving towards economic instruments like sanctions, but also having in mind the possibility to use military instruments, including the Article 42.7, which is about the mutual assistance clause of the Treaty of the European Union. And of course, the idea is to use space exercises to see how to best leverage those solidarity mechanisms. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, one of the chapters is very much related as well to the use of space for security and defense. So how space is a key enabler for security and defense. We are making huge investment in space, starting with our space flagships, Galileo, Copernicus, and tomorrow EEAS. So here the point is, how can we ensure that those big flagships can be best used by the military and armed forces and security users? So basically, there is a bit of a paradigm shift. And here we're saying we need to really break silos between space and defense. And actually what we need to do is, when designing and preparing space programs or space services, we need to onboard military needs and military requirements from day one. Not at a later stage, but from the very beginning. That's a big change compared to the way we are doing space today. And actually, EEAS is a bit of a pioneer and an example, because we are, again, onboarding space military requirements from day one of this program. But clearly here, we need to bring closer together the space community and the defense community to ensure that the big investment we are making in space can be useful and maximized by the military community as well. I'd like to mention 2 pilot projects, so basically 2 new services that we want to contemplate in the upcoming years. One is related to Earth observation. So we want to have a governmental service that would be highly resilient, that would be continuously available for member states in the field of Earth observation, and that would complement national and commercial assets Of course, we need to start somewhere, and this somewhere is Copernicus. So we would develop this pilot project within Copernicus, but in parallel, we want to study options for the future, for the next multi-annual financial framework. And therefore, we will commission studies in the coming months, again, to give us the options related to the future. So which are the infrastructures we need, the budget size required, the architecture, all that kind of questions. So we will contract studies to help us in that regard. The second pilot project is related to space domain awareness that I mentioned before. Here, what we have in mind is not an EU-owned service. This is very much about federating national assets, pooling national assets, and incentivizing the access to certain services, as I mentioned to you. Plus, we need to contemplate the synergies with the EU SST that you know very much. In that section, two key enablers. One is innovation, and you mentioned that in your intro. We want to really promote more collaboration between space, security, and defense startups. This is very much in the making. We want to be very practical and to do very pragmatic things. So one is running activities together with our colleagues in the directorate dealing with defense and DG Defis. So I can tell you, for instance, 10 days ago, we ran the first ever hackathon that had as a key thematic space for security and defense. That's number one. Number two, we will have a Cassini matchmaking in Estonia, latitude 59 in May, that will very much focus as well on this thematic. So we will bring investors, we will bring relevant startups from the space and from the defense communities together, so that we can, again, in a very practical ways, bring together defense and space startups and relevant investors, private investors. But there are more to come. First, we want as well to really better synchronize our programs, so European Defence Fund, Horizon Europe, Space Program, so that we can synergize what we're doing. So I'd like to mention spin-in as well, so how certain technologies that are developed within Horizon Europe can be leveraged by defense through the European Defence Fund to add, if you want, the defense layer, and how certain technologies developed within the context of EDF can be of benefits as well for the space program, for instance, when it comes to developing new space-based services for the defense and military. So we want really to break silos in programmatic terms between EDF, the space program, and Horizon Europe, without touching, of course, one, the objectives of the respective programs, and two, the governance of the respective programs. So we need to find very informal and pragmatic ways to enhance the synergies. And again, the fact that we are organizing very concrete activities where we bring together the defense community, so the space startups, defense startups, for me is the way to get there. I'd like to mention InnoBit validation services as well. InnoBit validation and demonstration, that's something that we want to open up as well to defense space startups a bit more. So this is something that we are contemplating. Skills is the second big driver. Talking to, I had two hats. One is space defense, the other one is new space. So we are in touch with many of your colleagues in different regions, many startups, and we're very much aware about the shortage that we face when it comes to skills. Many startups are looking for talents, but have huge difficulties to hire those talents in Europe. This is a very problematic issue, and we want to take actions as well to improve the skills and so that we can develop space services for security and defense. Here, we know that there are many actions that are in the pipeline at local and regional level, so we need to see how we can best support and further develop those actions at local and regional levels. If we move to the next one, and that's going to be the last slide. offer. The last chapter. Margarita?
Sorry, there is, yes, there is a technical
Voilà,
issue.
here we are.
Okay.
So quickly, this is about the international dimension. When it comes to the international dimension, we have two objectives. One is, again, to continue promoting responsible behavior in the UN, in other global forums, in talking to certain like-minded countries. So that's objective number one. And again, no misunderstanding. It's not because we're bringing closer together space and defense that we are militarizing space. This is not the issue. We want to continue promoting a peaceful use of space, and we are very active in international forums to do that. So that's objective number one. Objective number two is how can we team up in terms of capability building, especially when it comes to NATO. You know, we had a first. We are intensifying the dialogue with NATO to identify concrete areas of cooperation, starting with exercising, sharing of information and intelligence, standardization activities. So basically, we really want to team up with NATO as well to see how we can cooperate together in terms of capacity building. So that's something that we want to pursue with NATO. Another thing I'd like to mention as well is that, sorry, just if you give a space security dialogue with certain countries, of course, including with non-like-minded countries. So basically to have at least an open channel of discussion with certain countries that we conceive as rival countries, unfriendly countries, but still it's very important to have this open channel of discussion with them. Voilà. So thank you very much for your attention. Is that the last slide, Margareta, or is there any? No, exactly. That's the last slide. So just in terms of next steps, what you need to know is that basically we are engaging again with member states during the Swedish presidency. And with industry, so that we have, again, a collective understanding on how we want to implement the strategy. And then during the Spanish presidency second semester, this will be the kind of moment where member states will formally negotiate and agree upon council conclusions in different council forums. The impact of this strategy, I'd like to mention that as a last word. It will have a long-term programmatic impact. So it's a new driver. It is here to stay, and we will need to assess the impact of this strategy as well for the evolution of the EU space programs and the different EU space components, including in the context of the next multi-annual financial framework. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to take any questions or remarks you may have.
Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I open the floor for questions. Please, as you are so many participants, we can't see if you raise the finger. Please indicate in the chat if you have a question, and your question, we monitor constantly the chat. If there is no one, I like to start. Guillaume, you described very well the paradigm shift we are experiencing now. Galileo and Copernicus, they were conceived as civil programs, but there is now a shift. The strategic compass, as you mentioned, identified space as a strategic domain. Heads of state called for the strategy for security and defense. Your service presented on the 10th of March the strategy. And it has an impact on the one hand on how we better protect and how we look at better protecting Europe's space infrastructure, but also using data services from European space infrastructure to improve the resilience of the Union. And key role on your one slide is Copernicus. You think of a new service for governmental service. Maybe we can show also this one slide again where the use of space is addressed. Regarding this new service, I have like two questions. On the one hand, Copernicus is featured and characterized, distinguished itself through free and open access. How will that be in the future? And we have been discussing with Commission and with ESA. There is really an issue with this funding gap coming through Brexit and other elements. You published this new strategy. How does that play down in terms of budget, and how does it play down in terms of budget for a new Copernicus service?
Thanks so much for your question. So indeed, on this Earth observation governmental service, the first thing I like to highlight is we need to make a clear delineation between what we can do in the short term, so these pilot projects, and what we can do in the longer term within the next MFF. In the short term, we have clear boundaries. We cannot come up with completely new ideas. We need to basically act within existing programs. For the future, we have more freedom. And that's where we will need to assess different options, as I mentioned to you, with the support of these feasibility studies that we will tender very soon. But we need to really make a clear delineation again between short term and long term. And what we will be doing in the short term with this pilot project will not preempt the future. And again, the future we will be discussing with member states, with industry, on how to best cope with the future to address the needs of member states. So we're not preempting the future. I'd like really to insist on this. And again, short term, we need to put together a service within existing program, which is Copernicus. So indeed, there are very relevant questions that we need to address. And you mentioned the free and open data access policy. So clearly, that will not change. I mean, the fact that we want to develop a pilot project for Copernicus government service will not affect or contaminate, if you want, the entire governance of Copernicus and the way and the data policy of Copernicus. But what we need to develop is certain and very specific and tailor-made rules that will underpin this governmental service, that pilot. That pilot will have very specific purposes. It will have to meet military requirements and security users requirements. And therefore, we need to provide the trust to the military and to the security users. And clearly, we need to define together a few rules. One is related to accreditation of that pilot service. Two, it is related to the anonymization of the request. Three, related to the dissemination or distribution policy. And fourth, to all security requirements to ensure that the service is indeed well protected. So there is a set of rules that we need to discuss with those users that will frame and underpin, if you want, this very pilot project. So again, no impact on Copernicus as a whole, but for that very specific and small service, we need very specific rules or very specific governance, if you want. And that's something that we need to elaborate. And that's the beauty of a pilot, to test, and here we really want to test through a pilot. You mentioned then the funding gap. So as you know, I mean, we are contemplating the positive moves on the UK side, so we will see where it will lead us, including in terms of potential participation in the Copernicus programs, and we very much hope that it could fix some of the funding issues. Here, we are talking about potentially small budgets with a huge return on investment when it comes to that pilot service. So it will not have any impact on, the way Copernicus operates. It would be very marginal. We are talking seed money to again test and demonstrate the added value of a new service within Copernicus for the time being, but that could evolve outside Copernicus in the future. And we are convinced that one, it would meet requirements of member states, and two, it's kind of huge return on investment because the service it would deliver would fix a gap that we face today. I hope it replies to your questions.
Yes, thank you. I have more questions, but I think I like now to give the floor to our stakeholder community. We invited today an SME from Brittany, Unseen Labs. Brittany is a quite active ecosystem, and maritime security is a very important topic for this ecosystem, and also how to position strategically different stakeholder. Please, Olivier, maybe you can give a short presentation of your company and share your vision on the strategy with us, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be there today and thanks again to give me the opportunity to present and talk about the Unseen Labs and also illustrate what Mr. Delabros explained and how space can support security and defense sector. So Unseen Labs, as you explained, we are based in Brittany, and we are focusing on space-based RF detection, saying that we are developing a constellation of satellites to monitor activities on the Earth with the first market today with the maritime domain. So we are able, thanks to our technology, we're able to detect and geolocalize and also characterize all ships at sea with the first and really a focus on dark ship. So to illustrate some after that. So who we are a French company created in 2015. Now we are more than 50 people in the company. And as I said, we developed a very unique constellation of cube satellite with an innovative technology on board of the satellite. Today we developed, as I said, a mono-satellite technology, so it's a very different way to monitor activity on the Earth compared to the cluster. So it's once again very unique, and we now really focus on radio frequency transmitters. So we detect some specific radio frequency activities with the first market today with the maritime. I will explain why later. So what we provide to our customer, it's actionable data and solution provided from the satellite. So now we have 8 satellites flying, and other will come. And next one will be announced in the next coming weeks. And I can just reinforce what Mr. Delabros said, that we need more launchers, especially in Europe. We encourage that. We are looking for more opportunity to launch our satellite. The point is now as I said, we have 8 satellites, but on a full constellation, the target is to have between 20 and 25 satellites really dedicated to the maritime surveillance. They are flying on low orbit. And other things, what is interesting, the coverage that we are able to do. It's minimum 500 by 500 kilometers, so it's very large area that we are able to monitor in a few seconds with a good accuracy. The feedback from customer is we are talking about 1 kilometer on accuracy. Why we decide to focus first on maritime surveillance? maritime defense. So many topics to address still. Here's some few numbers, few figures about the different topic that we address, like the maritime traffic is 90% of the goods are transferred at sea. And most of the time, we don't know exactly where are the ships. It could be an issue from different stakeholders or different entity to monitor. We talk about also the big one with the EUU, illegal fishing. We can consider that between 15 and 20% of the ships come from the illegal fishing. So it's an important topic for different countries. And if we talk about the resources, it's a very huge issue. Piracy as well, or pollution at sea. So this is typically some market or topic that we can address with thanks to our technology. What I say, we are able to detect or localize. The point is, with the radio frequency, we are focusing on specific beacon that even if the ship would like to turn off the other and to be dark to start making some illegal activity, we are still able, thanks to our technology, we are still able to detect, localize, and characterize. So here it's just an example, not to go on the details on that, but really the idea that radio frequencies could be complementary with the other space data provider like the EEAS, the optical of SAR. Really the idea that the fusion of all these data sources could be improve the maritime domain awareness and give to the stakeholder a view on what's really going on this area and help them to take the good decision. So to answer the different threats that they can reach. So when I say also characterize, we are able to create a unique fingerprinting or the beacon that we are able to catch, seeing that it's helpful also to track the ship, be able to not only localize but also to track the ship. Who are the customer or people who could have interest at this kind of information of data? I would say everybody who have assets at sea or interest at sea. So we now address and we support some navies. We can support as well some Coast Guard, some different countries. So this is really how they use our data to be complementary with the other data sources that they have, and try to reveal the dark activities. This is really the way. And as I mentioned, we cover large area in a few seconds. We can monitor, for example, supporting some countries who have very large economic zone. We can help them to optimize the way they monitor this and be able to increase and try to improve the security on the economic zone to be able to reveal the dark activities. So the last slide really to summarize the different topics and different market we can address thanks to the space data and on radio frequencies. So we can talk about fishing, civilian government, insurance, ship owners. Once again, everybody who have interest or assets at sea could really be interesting by the data from space. Thank you for your attention. Feel free if you have any questions.
Thank you, Olivier, for your illustrative presentation. When we look at the strategy that Guillaume just presented and your presentation, so we see dual use is really in the center of the strategy. And maybe also we need to look at technologies that are already existing and to do some reflection. How could they maybe also used in a security and safety context? Guillaume, do you also make targeted efforts to look and to work with companies to see how to transform existing technologies for a more, let's say, safety and security dimension?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, okay, so we are launching as part of the implementation of this strategy, this new work stream to really break silos at the level of companies as well between space and defense. And actually, I mean, large industry already is delivering civilian applications and most of the time military applications as well. So dual use is very entrenched within a large company. But what we see as well is that more and more we have national authorities that are directly purchasing services from new space companies. I mean, Ensign is a concrete example. I mean, Ensign is selling services to relevant countries, not just EU countries, but non-EU countries as well. So this is something that we see more and more, that new space actors do sell services to defense ministries or ministries dealing with home affairs. So this is precisely what we need to foster, including through the Cassini activities. So indeed, we want now to really engage more systematically as well with the companies to bring them closer as well to the defense community, so that they can sell and their products, their services in a more kind of easier manner to the defense. Of course, I mean, we need to ensure that all the startups have the credentials and can scale up in Europe as well. I mean, you know, for defense ministry to purchase certain services, they need certain guarantees, and they want as well to ensure that that startup will stay in the EU and not move elsewhere. And this is where actually all the Cassini activities that we are running are pertinent to ensure again that our startups can scale up in the EU and commercialize activities within the EU. So that's again two complementary features and instruments, but this is very essential to ensure that again our startups can deliver to the defense ministries and security user ministries.
Thank you. Before I move on to the next speaker, one thing came to my mind. A question to you, Guillaume and Olivier. Can we share your presentation with the participants?
Yes, of course. On my
Okay.
side, no
Yes,
problem.
sure.
Okay, perfect. I like to give the floor to Constanze Wolf from the Aerospace Cluster in Baden-Württemberg, the Luft- und Raumfahrtforum. Mrs. Wolf, your cluster is a member of our network, the Nereus network, but also of the ENDR network, the European Network of Defense-related regions. So you have also in your network companies who work on safety, security issues and defense, like Guillaume described. Maybe you can present us your organization and a bit the view you have on the strategy, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. As Ms. Chrisakis told you, my name is Constanze Wolf. I'm from the Forum Aerospace of Baden-Württemberg. We are formally organized as an association, so the membership in our cluster is freely, so we have to develop lots of services and need to be attractive for our members. That's the point. Our members are mostly companies building hardware, but also companies who are building integrators. We have companies who are doing software and also services. And yeah, at least we also have some research and technology transfer institutions so that we can combine research and technology transfer institutions and all our companies so that we can do a knowledge and technology transfer. As you can hear, I'm a little bit, I have a cold, so I'm very sorry. My speech isn't that good today. Our network is working on several fields. We have several working groups. One is working on security as well, but also on topics like new space and future aviation. Another part of our work is the political part. We are closely working together with the legislation in Baden-Württemberg, and that's also one point that I want to tell you. Our Baden-Württemberg is going to set up a strategy for aerospace, for aero and space, which will take place in July this year. And for the next 2 years, our Forum Aerospace will take a relevant part in this strategy. And I would be glad to tell you some more about it when the strategy will have started. So yeah, that's all from me now.
Thank you very much. I think with the strategic process in your region, we should stay in touch. It could be very interesting for other regions to see what you are doing in Baden-Württemberg, and it could be also interesting to discuss with the Commission your ideas on new space and how what are your experiences with the companies in the new space sector. We broadly see in our network that regions tend to adopt a much more strategic approach on space, see the strategic value. We have regions that define their regional space strategies, like Catalonia, like Hesse, who has with Jan-Dietrich Wörner a space coordinator for its region, with Catalonia that puts focus on new space, and they have a constellation of nanosatellites. And we have regions that define data exploitation strategies, and other regions that have space really as a strategic asset, as a tool for innovation and economic growth in their smart specialization strategies. Maybe Guillaume, would you like to have we're coming now to the end. Would you like to have a last word to give us takeaway from the strategy? I have one last question. There's one new in the chapter on the use of space for security and defense. You will create a new Copernicus service, and throughout the whole strategy, improving, building, developing skills is an important element. And I read about improved skills of public administration and industry to further develop space services for security and defense. How do you are going to address this group?
Sorry, I had a quick. So the skills, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. No, and that actually it's good because I wanted to highlight this point in the end. So when it comes to the skills, again, there is a clear shortage, and especially it's good to see that many new actors, many new entrepreneurs want to do business in space and develop their activities in space. We have actually lots of member states where those new space actors are increasing their activities. But one of the big shortages, I mean, there are two challenges. One, access to equities, because for them to scale up quickly, they need equities. So that's challenge number one, and that's what we are addressing, including through the Cassini activities. Challenge number two is skills. We often see again their needs. They need to hire people quickly. and they are really struggling to get those talents. So that's why skills is a matter of urgency that we need to fix. And we are talking to different communities to see how to fix that. What we see again is that we have there is a bit of a gap that we need to fix, and this triangle between universities, LTOs, and industry, startups, basically. So, because sometimes in universities we do have curricula that are a bit outdated, if you want. The way we are training, educating the next generation is outdated, does not match the requirements of startups and industry. So that discrepancy, we need to fix it. And we know that some regions are pretty active in building clusters, for instance, space clusters, putting together universities, the local ecosystem of the startups, LTOs, and larger industry. This is precisely what we need to incentivize. So to have more clusters, more regional clusters, and that's where your network is so important as well, because you're talking to the regions, and I'm sure that you could organize as well kind of sharing of the best experiences. So what is functioning, what is not functioning. But I think it very much matters that at EU level, we first try to embed our activities within the activities that are run by EU regions. I don't want to create something artificial or superficial. It needs to be rooted in, again, very concrete and pragmatic initiatives that the regions are doing. So this is why, I mean, we were discussing recently with so New Space. They have put together a syndicate. Yes, syndicate, you may be aware. So bringing together different startups from different countries. We are talking to them to see how we can really incentivize, again, the skills. What really matters as well is that CEOs of those companies do create vocation. They need to talk to these students. They need to offer the possibilities to have trainees embedded within companies. So to do Ausbildung. Germany, for instance, you have this Alternance scheme. So all those concrete stuff, it needs to be incentivized, but clearly the key is the personal commitment of the CEOs of those new startups companies. They can attract, they can create vocation, they can sell their companies, they can attract skills, they can create vocation, and that's what we need. So this is why we're talking to them as well. So two levels for me, regions, and again, the startups, the new space companies to really attract and create vocation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Talking about skills, one of our participants likes to take the floor and quickly comment. Milva Carbonara, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And thanks for organizing this very interesting webinar, Roya and Margarita. Just to complement what Monsieur Delabrosse was announcing regarding skills, thank you for supporting this as a key enabler, let's say, for the space economy and for, let's say, the strategy on security and defense. Just to announce that DG DEFIS and DG Employment are supporting let's say, launch of the new space large-scale skills partnership on space data services and application. And so this, I mean, I wanted to intervene just to thank DG DEFIS and DG Employment for supporting this large-scale partnership, and of course to invite all the colleagues present here if they want to reach out to us to collaborate for upskilling the current workforce, but also attract new talents and also, let's say, operate a kind of generational change in our domain to reach out to us through Nereus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milva.
Indeed, Roya, just quickly
yes,
on this
please.
one. Thank you so much, Milva. And these large-scale partnerships on space data and applications will be indeed formally launched end of April. So that's very good news. So you see, I mean, we are trying to really advance quickly on all different fronts.
Okay, that's quite important information for our community. Thank you to all. I think now we are coming to the end. Thank you all speakers for joining, for making this really a rich debate. Thank you, Guillaume, for joining us this morning. I think you addressed very important topics and very relevant for our community, and I see really to stay in touch and exchange more on a long-term vision. And this is a series we are going to have in May, the next session, and we will keep you informed. We addressed and discussed skills. The Nereus Education Training webinar will start at 11 o'clock, and Margarita put for you also the link so you can also share with interested colleagues. And we will prepare and share the presentation and follow up with you after the meeting. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I wish you a very nice day as well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Have a nice day.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
nice
much.
day.
Thank you.